Hello and welcome to the TechArena podcast. My name is Kaluka Wanjala. So recently I had a chance to talk to a few people across the Cardano ecosystem in Africa. So we are talking about developers, educators, to infrastructure builders and even community leaders. And this episode will be about that. And the episode is brought to you in partnership with Beyond the Code. You can check them out at beyondthecode.ai. So instead of just posting the different interviews individually, I thought I should do something different. So across the conversation that I had with the different individuals, I kept coming back to one central question, which was who's really shaping the future of blockchain in Africa, and what role will African builders actually play in that future? So to explore this question, we'll hear directly from 7 different people working in different parts of the ecosystem, and after each clip, I'll share my few reflections on what stood out for me and how it connects to the bigger picture. So let's get started. The first conversation I had was with Collins and Jeremiah from Tamed Stakepool. The idea is simple but very powerful. Use Stakepool rewards to fund scholarship and bring more young Africans into the blockchain. But they are also realistic about the challenges that they can encounter as they are trying to achieve this.
Okay, so Tamed is grounded, so actually we live on the real world constraints. So blockchain actually is meant to serve those in the underserved regions. So actually we being in this stage, we have benefit from the blockchain. So believe that when someone delegates with Tamed, he can also benefit more underserved students.
So speaking to Jeremiah and Collins further, what stood out for me here was that this isn't just about funding education, it's about participation. So their goal is to bring students on-chain, not just into classrooms. So this means that learning how the blockchain works, understanding governance, and eventually the students can become contributors themselves. But even as they pointed that out, they also pointed out something very important.
Okay, so our main focus is not actually more on the scholarship part. We are here, so we are focusing on the skills. We want people to understand these tech skills so that they can use it in the day-to-day life. So we want to bring people on chain so that they can participate in the governance, they can engage with the community, just like we are here. So we like to bring more people to this community, not only funding scholarship.
They also touched a bit on the rewards and that they are not fixed because blockchain fluctuates. Let's listen to this.
Okay, so thank you. So actually we will not promise the fixed because we understand that the crypto prices fluctuate. So maybe we can be funding scholarship with the knowing what we are doing exactly, because the prices fluctuate. So we can't promise a stable that will be funding the scholarship with a stable coin, because stable coins, the prices don't fluctuate that much, but with cryptos like Cardano, the price fluctuates.
And this honestly matters because most crypto projects tend to promise stability and guaranteed outcomes, which is not what Collins and Jeremiah are trying to do, because they emphasize that the ecosystem is still evolving and they want to be part of that ecosystem. And this actually raises serious, interesting questions. If the blockchain is going to support education and long-term development in Africa, how do we design systems that balance opportunity with unpredictability? This question will come out later in the conversation, so continue listening. Next, I had a conversation with Darlington from Blockchain Center Nairobi, and he started by describing and introducing what they do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Kaluka. Darlington. We run the Blockchain Center Nairobi in Kilimani. And what we're doing at the center is trying to create a hub for a wide range of emerging technologies across blockchain, not just one blockchain, but as many blockchains as possible across AI and pretty much all of the emerging technology. The big idea is to have the hub be a place of training and capacity building, and then from that capacity that we have, help brands establish grassroots presence in Nairobi and within Kenya via hackathons and meetups and workshops.
So their main focus is on building physical infrastructure for the community. So we are not just talking about online spaces, but places where developers, founders, and students can meet, learn, and collaborate. Let him explain.
It's a great question. The big difference with the Blockchain Center is on two sides: the brand or the technology or the platform partner, as well as the community. For the platform partner, what we're trying to offer you is batteries included community platform. If you go to some of the other spaces within Nairobi, all they're giving you is a space, chairs and tables. We try to include all the batteries. What do I mean by that? We try to get you printers where you can print your stuff locally. We help with marketing. We can set up live streaming for hybrid events or online only events or just backup. Basically, we try to make it so as a community manager, all you're focusing on is your technology and your platform, and you're doing as little housekeeping as possible. We have an event team that can help you organize and plan your event, and even with catering. We try to do all of that stuff so you just focus on growing your community. And then for the just community members, the Blockchain Center, with support from our platform and technology partnerships, it's an open space for any folks within the area to just walk in and work. You don't have to pay anything. There's backup generator. There's usually free coffee. Hopefully you know how to regulate yourself and not take too much. But we're trying to have that space. So now as a community person, 3, 4, 5 times a week, there is different technologies happening, events happening at the space that you can just walk in and benefit from. And then if you need a space for co-working, limited spaces available, but you can just walk in through the door and just bring your laptop and just work.
Listening to Darlington, one phrase that stuck with me is what he said, batteries included. This reflects something unique about emerging tech ecosystems. People don't just need technology, they also need support systems. And Darlington went further ahead to share the numbers to show how quickly interest is growing in such ecosystems.
Yes, the numbers are steadily going up. Obviously, as you said, when things launch, you get the full spectrum of excitement and interest. With the Blockchain Center, you get the steady people who are committed to pursuing pursuing opportunities that can change their life. So when we're trying to partner with companies, we're really focusing. Remember, the vision is dual-fold, is helping companies grow their community in Kenya, but then also helping Kenyans get connected to opportunities, right? I have worked within the Cardano blockchain space for 2 years and been able to support myself on the income I get just from working within Cardano. There's so many of these opportunities that exist. So we're trying to have a place where both groups meet. So the interest has been growing and growing and growing. The Cardano community that uses the Blockchain Center as its base, I think last time I checked, we were over 600 interested community members. With the meetups, went from 60 to 80, and now usually over 100 people show up for that event. The Meta Hackathon saw, I think we hit 100 plus developers. We've had Sui in there, Avalanche in there, and a few other blockchains I'm forgetting. Base has been in there.
So having listened to him, it's very clear that the talent is there, the curiosity is there. But building sustainable ecosystems require more than enthusiasm. It requires education, which brings us to the next conversation. Next, I had a chat with Linetta, who works with PLP and Axcel Africa. These are organizations that are focused on training the next generation of developers across the continent. Their goal is very ambitious: to reach millions of learners with practical technology skills.
And Project, I'm the partnerships lead in community. So Powerland Project is a social impact organization trying to democratize tech skills. So we are doing this by trying to make tech skills accessible to as many youth as possible between the age of 18 to 35. So our flagship program was the 1 million devs for Africa, where we have been able to train over 30,000 youth in software development skills, and 62% have been able to be placed and 20% have been able to come up with startups. So with the evolving tech, we are also evolving into Web3 and blockchain, where we have been able to introduce Web3 courses, blockchain courses, and we are continuously going ahead to train youth in these skills.
So the scale here is very impressive. Tens of thousands of students trained, thousands placed in internship and jobs. But what really stood out for me is their focus on practical experience.
Yes, thank you for that question. So for you to be able to graduate from Powerland Project, you actually have to come up with a capstone project at the end of your training. So for example, for the 1 million devs, you're able to come up with a project that is aligned with the SDGs. So not unless you come up with that project, you will not be able to graduate. So this way, we make sure that they are just not learning skills, but they are not just learning, but they actually have tangible skills.
She added that their learners find what they're doing to be very impactful to their careers.
Students, they come in with an eager to learn. So once they learn, that is when now they want to transition into either employment or ventures. So we have started now, because of this demand, we were able to start a talent hub. And so when talking about the most attractive thing for our learners, I think I would say is how we are able to deliver the content. So the skills that we are able to offer.
Education in technology often struggles with gaps between theory and practice. So programs like this can help close that gap. But even with that said, with the talent pipelines growing, there's still another big challenge: scale. How can they scale to accommodate the growing demand? So that's where the infrastructure comes in. Next up, I had a conversation with Adam Dean, who works with Hydra, which is a scaling solution designed to increase transaction throughput on Cardano. At a technical level, Hydra allows transactions to happen off-chain before settling back on the main network. But what interested me the most wasn't the technical details. It was his perspective on user experience.
Hydra is it's a state channel, and so essentially we branch off from Cardano L1 and we have our own little mini blockchain inside of the Hydra head. And so we take that little mini blockchain and we can do millions of transactions per second. So if you imagine, even on a global scale of a Visa or a MasterCard, we can actually have their entire transaction volume going inside of a Hydra head. But at the end of the day, what's really important about a Hydra head is it settles back to the Cardano L1. And so whether or not that's distributing the funds onto Cardano or simply publishing a proof, what we have is a verifiable history of those transactions. And so Hydra really does give Cardano infinite scale, but there's always a drawback. So in the case of Hydra, usually our sacrifice is we become slightly less decentralized while we're in the Hydra head, but then we come back to the great decentralization that is the L1 when we publish that final proof.
Then he said something that really stuck with me.
That's the beauty of it, and I think that's what we need to be building in blockchain in general. And if you were following like Charles and his speeches during the recent Japan tour that we were on, I think what we need to be doing is obfuscating away the blockchain. We need to be giving users the benefit of the blockchain without the hassle of the blockchain. And so if we're using a Hydra head, like for Hydra events, I want you to log in with Google and never know that a blockchain is involved, but I want to publish that proof on the Cardano L1 so that when it matters because we're having an audit, I can actually present the proof that is on the decentralized blockchain, that is immutable. But in the meantime, the users never get to see or know about blockchain. That's the way it needs.
In other words, the most successful blockchain systems might be the ones users don't even notice. That idea connects directly to adoption, because for most people, the technology itself isn't the goal, the value it creates is. But adoption also depends on governance, and that's where the next conversation becomes really important. The next conversation was with Intersect. Intersect plays a key role in coordinating development and governance within the Cardano ecosystem. When I spoke with Jack, we discussed how decision-making actually works in a decentralized network.
1694 is calling it differently. Cardano Improvement Proposal 1694 was the spec for what is governance today. So that document is on the SIP repos under the Cardano Foundation, and essentially it describes the governance system that Cardano has at the moment, which really is around three different roles and areas. So one is the Constitution, which we ratified here in Kenya in 2024, and I can see some delegates as well in the room, so that we're here from 2024 as well. So the Constitution is essentially our rule book. It helps us guide decision making. It also sets the standards and rules that we can all follow as a community, as a global community together. It's really impressive, actually. There's no other blockchain in the world that has a constitution quite like Cardano. It's very unique, and it just allows everyone to be playing on the same playing field. So that's one thing that SIP 1694 describes, is the constitution and how it interacts with the blockchain and the people. The second thing is delegated representatives. So those are the people that, as an ADA holder, you delegate to, and you can also be a DREP, so anyone can be a DREP, or you can delegate your ADA to a DREP, and they vote on your behalf. And essentially, there'll be lots of votes coming through that we need decisions on. That might be treasury funding, that might be parameter changes, that might be electing a new constitutional committee. All of those things require votes and ADA holders to say yes or no. And DREPs do that, play that role in the system. And the third part of the system really is actually the on-chain specification. So what are the parameters that we can change? Do we want to have a bigger block size? Do we want to change the Constitutional Committee from 7 to 5, which is actually a current vote right now? And how does the Treasury work? What safeguards do we have on the Treasury? What thresholds do we need to see to approve something? Some changes need 51%, some changes need 67%. To change the Constitution, you need 75%. So all of those things essentially is the code, really, of making on-chain governance real and truly automated. So what's really impressive about this is that if we have a parameter change today, we do in fact have one. So as I said, there's a proposal to change the min committee size from 7 to 5. There's no human that needs to do that work. Someone put up the vote, people will vote on it, and if it's passed, it happens automatically on chain. It's enacted automatically. So that's the most impressive thing about the technology side of governance, is that it's not me at Intersect or the Cardano Foundation or IOG or any of the founding entities that decide these things or make them happen. It's us as a community. So that's 1694, and what it means for Kenyan builders is it means that you know exactly the rules you're playing to. No one can change them without your permission or without there being a consensus for the community. So we did see a new constitution only last month that received 75% of DREP vote and support, so it passed, which means that the community wanted to happen, right, and move forward. But the most important thing for builders, not just in Kenya but everywhere, is that we're playing by the same rules, and we all know them.
So at first glance, decentralized governance sounds straightforward. Everyone can participate. But there is another dimension to consider.
I think the Constitution was a big part of that, actually. The first Constitution that was ratified was heavily shaped by African voices. I think the challenge we've got, and I'll just to be honest with the room, is that the system we have is stake-based. So it is wealth-dependent. If you have 1 million ADA, your voice is louder than someone that's got 100 ADA. And that remains a problem, right? I think if we're honest about it, it's an issue. Because on a spectrum, if you go from having a plutocratic model, which is what we have today, so how much ADA you have is your voting weight, to the other end of the spectrum, which is one wallet, one vote, or one human, one vote, we need to move that dial towards that end goal. There are pros and cons, though, with this. It's important that the people with the largest stake in the ecosystem typically have the best interests of the ecosystem, and so therefore will vote in a way that is good for the ecosystem. That's the theory behind what's good about plutocratic models. However, it's not inclusive, it's not very accessible, and it doesn't help us move to what I think should be the end goal for public infrastructure, where everyone has an equal voice. We have to move that way technology-wise, but I think one thing we can do, and we're starting to explore, is quadratic methods and methodologies and formulas and how we can start to bridge that gap. But it's a long journey. I think it's a 5 to 10 year journey before we can really feel like every voice is equal. Do you know what I mean?
That means influence is proportional to stake. The more ADA you hold, the more weight your vote carries. And that raises an important question for emerging regions like Africa. Participation is open, but influence still depends on capital. So how do communities ensure their voices are heard? Part of that answer might be in how value is created and shared, which leads us to the next conversation. Next, I had a chat with Kennedy from Rejuve Bio, who is working at the intersection of blockchain, artificial intelligence, and healthcare. The idea is to allow people to contribute their healthcare data while maintaining ownership and receiving incentives.
So we want to ensure that there's good infrastructure in place so that African markets aren't locked out later. Longevity, there's kind of a misconception that it's a luxury good, that it's something for wealthier markets. But really, I've always seen longevity more as like preventative medicine come true. That's sort of how I've always framed it in my mind, because if we focus more on preventative medicine and the basics of healthcare prevention and getting in front of diseases from a systems perspective before they actually cause problems, then healthy longevity is sort of a natural result of that.
This was the most fascinating part of the entire event, because for Africa we do hold enormous genetic diversity. That diversity could play a major role in the future of personalized medicine. But historically, data from the continent has always been extracted and monetized elsewhere. Kennedy addressed this directly.
Cardano is building the actual infrastructure, and especially for decentralizing data sharing. One thing that I am passionate about is open science and working on biomedical research collectively, especially in the longevity field. Something that's sort of, I think, shot us in the foot is falling into the pharma trap of like siloing data and trying to work on these problems in private echo chambers, which isn't really going to help any of us. One of the things that a strategic advantage that Africa specifically has is that, because of the genetic diversity, Africa essentially holds the key to personalized medicine for the rest of the world. But there needs to be incentives for that, and data can't just be extracted and monetized elsewhere. That's obviously wrong. So there needs to be a system in place for the data to stay locally, but the learning to be able to be shared and people to be compensated fairly for that. And that's a very attractive solution that Cardano blockchain can help us provide.
So now the real question becomes, can blockchain create systems where communities benefit from the value they generate? I leave that up to you. The final conversation highlighted the importance of community builders who connect the technology, education, and entrepreneurship.
Thank you. So Prisma organizes transformation-oriented events, which take several months to organize because we're working with systems. We facilitate teams to organize themselves in response to a purpose that they identify. And so that's a long organizing process, which finishes with an in-person intensive that's basically like a hackathon. So one of our last events was in Accra in Ghana last year, and we had 25 participants that formed 3 teams. And each of those teams were very in touch with their local context. And we have 2 team leads from those teams here today. So we'll be hearing from them in the later stages of this program. What's so great about that is that they've continued to work on their projects, which were not coming from any predefined hackathon track, but really come from what they identify is important to them and their communities.
What this conversation made clear for me is that ecosystems are never built by technology alone. They're built by people who organize communities, create opportunities, and help others navigate the new systems.
So we actually come from a background in ecology and living systems science. So although there's a strong aspect of technology in all of our work, we bring an ecological perspective. So our program is designed to encourage participants to walk their neighborhood, to observe it with a fresh perspective, and to observe what dynamics are at play in their systems of their locality. And I think that's something that's very different to most hackathons. For a lot of participants, it feels very unusual to them. It feels strange. They're not used to this. And so there's an initial inertia that's needed to overcome to engage with our methodology. And a lot of it is about encouraging them to bring their own leadership. So to step into that takes a bit of time, but then once they do, is really powerful.
So to conclude, Toby from Prisma shared why community building works for them and why Cardano and WADA.
Cardano specifically, we're trying to guide teams towards creating a verifiable measurement, which serves as like the underlying metric of their project, because the long-term aim for our work is for these teams to publish data-backed stories of what it means to work on systems change in their local contexts. And so that's the Cardano part, is the verified measurement. And then obviously with WADA, it's been a very rich and long collaboration. They help in getting in touch with the hubs on the ground and coordinating across many levels of this whole.
Across the 7 different conversations we've had, a few themes kept appearing. First, the talent in Africa is undeniable. From developers and educators to entrepreneurs and researchers, there is incredible amount of innovation happening across the continent. Second, infrastructure matters a lot. Not just the technical infrastructure like scaling solutions, but community infrastructure which ranges from the hubs, training programs, and mentorship. And finally, governance and value capture remain open questions. Blockchain promises decentralization, but the real test will be whether communities can shape these systems in ways that create lasting benefits. That is something we'll continue to talk about in future episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow us, like and share it with someone who is interested in the future of technology in Africa. Once again, this episode was brought to you in partnership with Beyond the Code, and you can check them out at beyondthecode.ai. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Kaluka Wanjala, and this is the TechArena podcast.